quarterback coming in for the Bengals gets a standing ovation. And listen to the roar from the crowd. But a perfect strike to 𝐈𝐧𝐭. The NFL passing champion this year, all-pro performer.
Well, friends, welcome to Just a Couple of Guys, a podcast devoted to talking everything, now in our fourth year. Your host, our trusty legal advisor, Pat Crimmins, and yours truly, Ray Rogino. Today we engage one of the Fox Valley's most notable sports figures, Ken Anderson, former MVP quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, who played in the 1982 Super Bowl game against Joe Montana and the San Francisco 49ers. Pat, you and I are old enough to have watched the exploits of Ken Anderson. My opinion, you need to see him in the Hall of Fame.
Well, I'm a Raider fan, and until Jim Plunkett gets into the Hall of Fame, I have a bias. But he does have the statistics. He did play in a Super Bowl. He's a wonderful guy, and he has the stats. So I don't know. There are other people ahead of him, but yes, I think he does belong there.
Well, I won't disagree with you about Plunkett. I won't disagree with you about Plunkett one iota. I think both deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. They're both Hall of Fame quarterbacks. I watched them both. They were tremendous, and
right.
So.
Well, the question, I think is, if you don't win the Super Bowl, can you get into the Hall of Fame? And then you just look at Dan Marino, and that shouldn't be the line. That can't be the line, because Dan Marino obviously had a wonderful career, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So, why are they treated differently than cornerbacks or linebackers or offensive tackles? So, I think that he deserves consideration, no doubt.
We'll talk to Ken about his playing days, and also about coaching, retirement, and growing up in Batavia, Illinois. All of that after we give one of our fine sponsors a chat with you. We'll be back shortly. Located along Elgin's award-winning Riverwalk, the 𝐓𝐤𝐻 Cultural Center has been bringing top-tier performances to the Fox Valley since 1969. Designed by the architects behind the Willis Tower, this striking theater combines historic modern charm with exceptional acoustics, creating an intimate setting for every show. Legendary artists like B.B. King, Rush, and Blue Oyster Cult have performed on its stage, and today the 𝐓𝐤𝐻 continues to host world-class music, comedy, dance, theater, and more. The main stage season is bigger, bolder, and more exciting than ever. From live concerts and internationally recognized dance performances to laugh-out-loud comedy, original productions, and multicultural celebrations, every event offers a memorable experience. Recent renovations have returned the 𝐓𝐤𝐻 into Fox Valley's premier venue for both major productions and community events. Don't miss your chance to see these incredible shows live. Reserve your seat now at 𝐓𝐤𝐻.org/tickets or call the box office at 847-931-5900. Music, dance, comedy, and so much more, live at the 𝐓𝐤𝐻. Hello, friends. Experience the energy, magic, and vibrancy of live performance at the ECC Arts Center, a premier destination for world-class entertainment, cultural enrichment, and artistic excellence right in the heart of the Fox Valley. From Grammy and Tony Award winners, rock and roll Hall of Fame icons, and stars from Broadway to Hollywood, the Arts Center's elegant Blizzard Theater and intimate Second Space Theater have welcomed some of the world's most celebrated performers. For more information and tickets, go to eccartscenter.org or call the box office at 847-622-0300. Well, we're back and very, very pleased today to have with us a former NFL legend. I say legend. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame, but he's certainly in the Hall of Fame in Cincinnati Bengal fans' eyes, and more importantly, Batavians' eyes. A long growing up as a Batavian, our friend Ken Anderson. Welcome, sir. Nice to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always nice to talk to people from back home.
Well, speaking of back home, I think it's a very appropriate and good to talk about growing up in Batavia. And I sat down and developed a kind of a laundry list of people I know you know for a variety of reasons. They were classmates, they were friends, and in some cases they were neighbors right across the yard or whatever the case may be. I'm going to throw these names out here, and I'd like you to just comment on perhaps each and every one of them in a capsule way. Dan Issel, Hall of Famer in basketball.
I tell you, Dan, he was a year older than I was, and our backyards went together, and so we kind of played all sports growing up together, and basketball, baseball. He was a first baseman. He played football, up until his senior year in high school. And the thing I remember most about Dan is when we played basketball, I mean, he could have scored 50 a game if he wanted to, but he was an unselfish teammate that made sure we were all included in that. And I always appreciated that about him.
Well, we had him on the podcast here a while back. I think I sent you a copy of that. And he was just a pleasure to talk to. And I think what you just said is reflective of how he presented himself on the podcast. I can't help but throw out the 12-term mayor of Batavia. I was associated with him for a while myself. Jeff Shelke.
Classmate. And every time I see him, I tell him the mayor's job of Batavia must be the worst job in the world because nobody else must want it for you to keep getting reelected. So that's kind of how I feel about Jeff.
How about Byron Von Hoff, who was drafted by the Mets and did have a stint in minor league baseball?
A real tragedy, in my opinion, because that was, at the time when they instituted the draft for Vietnam. And, if you were a professional athlete or had thoughts of being a professional athlete, I know the Bengals, all the NFL teams I talked to, I had a very low lottery number. So I was going to get drafted. And they said, get in, the Army Reserve or National Guard, on your own. We can get you where we want to get you. But there was a lot of pressure because they didn't want professional athletes, having priority over anybody else. And so Byron was in a National Guard unit in Joliet, Illinois, and he got me in his unit. But Byron, he was with that era with Tom Seaver and Jerry Kuzman, all those young Mets pitchers who were great in '69, and Byron missed spring training with those guys because he was doing his 6 months active duty for the National Guard. And when he got done, they tried to rush him through spring training to get him up there with those guys, and he threw out his arm and his career was over. So, who knows what could have been had the Mets taken better care of him.
And then, of course, we have a very colorful TV analyst who I enjoyed immensely, both on TNT and TBS, and just a first-rate analyst, Craig Sager.
And my best memory of Craig was he was a few years younger than me, and his dad really wanted him to be a baseball player. And so he had a batting cage in his backyard, and his dad paid me a little bit to come over and pitch to him and work with him on his hitting. And the pay wasn't that good, but they were one of the few people in town, the only people in town at that time that had an in-ground pool. And so I got to be able to use the pool along with throwing batting practice to him. So that was the enticement for me.
And then last but not least, I see him in the gym all the time, and he talks so highly of you. And of course, he's the catalyst of setting this thing up. Dean Anderson, an all-state basketball player at Batavia.
Yeah, and again, Dean was a year older than me, and so when I was a junior, he was a senior. He was the starting quarterback on the varsity. And I played safety. I was an all-conference safety, and he was always great to me. his father and my father worked together. They were custodians at the high school, so we've known each other for a long time. But a great athlete that went to North Texas State at the time to play basketball. But that was a great period in Batavia athletics. And I think when you're in a small town and a small high school, that athletics is kind of cyclical. And we were in a cycle. Then we had just a lot of good athletes in Batavia. And I think one of the distinctions is that the starting five on my seventh grade basketball team were the same starting five when I was a senior in high school. And you don't see that much anymore with Mike Brown and Denny Graves and Glenn Cushing and Tom Stefano. And unfortunately, we've lost three of them. But Stefano and I come back every year for the golf outing for the Batavia High School basketball program. And so Steph and I always have a chance to get together. And the day before the tournament, we'll always play golf. And then he arranges happy hour at the Moose for a lot of us old guys to get together. So it's always kind of fun to come back.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that, because otherwise I was going to mention the fact that you do come back to Batavia. You've given your time to the school, and of course the golf outing and the basketball program. Jim Roberts, former basketball coach there, leads all of that, and you do a great job. And I know they appreciate you and Dan Issel, all of them coming back and supporting the program. Pat?
When we had Dan Issel on our podcast, I asked him about the water in Batavia, because the odds of both of you guys living next to each other and both becoming pros in your sports, to me, that's amazing. Have you ever heard anything like that in all your travels?
No. In fact, when you come from town, I think it was about 7,500 when we were there. And here I played 16 years in the NFL and go to a Super Bowl. I'm MVP of the league, and I'm still second fiddle in Batavia.
That's right. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about high school and taking you back to high school. You mentioned you played safety. When did you start playing quarterback, if at all, in Batavia?
Well, I started playing, quarterback when I was in seventh grade. And
right, okay.
The reason I played quarterback is we had our first meeting where they were handing out pads and that, and the coach says, "All right, who wants to play wide receiver?" And of course, everybody raises their hand. And who wants to play running back? And everybody raised their hands. And who wants to play quarterback? And nobody raised their hand. So I did. So I was an instant starter then.
Right.
But, but it was the same thing. Like I said, we had, Dean was always ahead of me. So when I got into high school, on the fresh off, he was the quarterback. And we won. Then I played when I was a sophomore. And when we got, into the varsity, when I was a junior, he was the starter. So I had to wait my turn when I was a senior. But, as I remember that even our senior year, that I wasn't an all-conference quarterback. There were two other quarterbacks, and I can't remember their names. I know one was from Sycamore at that time that were better than I was, so I was an all-conference safety.
Were you being scouted or recruited at that point in time by colleges?
Not for football, basically, but I was, when I was 16, my driver's license said 5'5", 155 pounds. So I didn't get my growth spurt till, I got into college a little bit. So, I always thought my favorite sport was basketball. I always thought my best sport was baseball. And you kind of played football, in the fall to get you to the basketball season.
Right.
Because, again, when you're in a small town, all the coaches tend to coach more than one sport. And so they keep the numbers up. If you wanted to play basketball or wrestle, you had to go out for football or cross country.
Right.
And so football was kind of my way to get to the basketball season. And so, like I say, I had some interest in smaller schools, and a lot of kids from Batavia went to Augustana. And so I was going there to play basketball and baseball. And our football coach, Bill Day at the time, he says, "Ken, you really ought to go out for football." And so I know in fact, I got the letter framed here somewhere that is dated June 28th that I wrote to Ralph Stranko, the head coach at Augustana, to see if I could try out for football. And, at Division III schools, they take warm bodies. So he let me try out. And the year before I got there, they had won the conference, and their starter and backup were both sophomores. So going into their junior year, and I remember they had recruited like 6 other freshman quarterbacks. And so I get there, and after a couple of days, I asked the coach, I said, can I go play defense? I said, I was an all-conference safety. And they said, I'm just going to stick at quarterback for a while. And so when the season started, I ended up 3rd string. And so in the starter, the first game, the starter wasn't playing well, so they put the backup in. And so going into the second game, I was now the backup.
Right.
And we went out to play Augustana Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which were Division II. And at the end of the first quarter, they put me in, and my first pass was a 65-yard post pattern for a touchdown to Paul Ander, and I became the starting quarterback after that. So I played the rest of the year as the starter as a freshman, and went to basketball, and I was a month late. And but by Christmas, we were playing in the Chicago area, and one of the starting guards had 20 points in the first half, but had done something to upset the coach and benched him in the second half and put me in. And I had 20 points the second half, so he and I became the starting guard. So I played a full season of varsity basketball as a freshman. And then when the baseball coach called, we were hitting down in the bus barns. And I was a little bit tired at that time, so I never did play baseball, which I thought was my best sport. I was a catcher and a shortstop, and I always told Johnny Bench, if I'd have played baseball, they'd never made a hurt of you.
That's right. That's right. Now, the other sports allowed you to play football or play baseball or basketball. There was no infighting, and there was no I want them clean. I want them just to focus on football.
Well, no, again, we're talking Division III here. So, that was, a big difference for me. And I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. And I think one of the things that disappoints me a little bit nowadays is that at an early age, a kid has to decide, am I a basketball player? Am I a baseball player? Am I a football player? It becomes kind of a year-round thing.
Right.
And I always said that, playing multiple sports helped me be a better quarterback. As I said, I was a catcher and a shortstop. So I learned from a catcher that overhand throwing motion so the ball doesn't tail when you're trying to throw out a runner at second base. And then playing shortstop, I learned different arm angles to throw the football depending on what the play dictated. And all the footwork drills, you have in basketball, made me a better quarterback. So,
right.
Like I say, that I always, thought that growing up and having the ability to play more than one sports made me better at football.
I think I agree with you, but the advent of AAU and the money that it costs to put your kid into a sport.
No, and then as soon as football ends, you got your weight program, and then in the summer you got your 7-on-7 leagues, and you said basketball AAU, and baseball you've got your traveling teams, and then you got your private lessons in the off season, and all. So it, like I say, it's I think kids miss out on so much not playing more than one sport.
Did you ever yield the starting quarterback position once you took it?
No.
In high school?
No. And once I got to Augustana, I was the starter for 4 years, and I started on the basketball team for my first 3 years, and then my senior year we were on quarters. So after the football season, I dropped out after the fourth quarter or the first quarter because I was scheduled to go on my active duty for the National Guard, and I wanted to try to get that out of the way, before the draft. But for some reason, it got delayed, and the NFL draft was in January in those days. So once they were drafted, I moved to Cincinnati right away and started working with Bill Walsh.
Well, let me talk about that a little bit. Did you have any contact with the NFL before the draft? Anybody talk to you? Scouts, anything like that?
Well, a lot of people came by in the off season, and worked you out. It was kind of funny, as I think we all remember Jack Brickhouse, the famous Cubs and Bears announcer. Well, hey. Heck yeah. But his daughter was in my class at Augustana. So he always came out for Parents' Weekend every fall, and it was always around a football game. And
I see.
He came out, and my freshman year went back and told George Hallis, he said, I think there's this kid, you got to look at it out at Augustana. He's a freshman. He's going to be a pretty good quarterback. And every year he would come out and give the reports back, and they must not have trusted him because I think the Bears were the only team that didn't come out and scout me.
Really?
But I know when I played, Mike Brown came out to Rock Island and scouted me. Bill Walsh, during the football season, our coaches went out on Saturdays and scouted. And he came to Waukesha, Wisconsin, and saw me play against Carroll College, and then went to Cleveland for the Bengals game the next day. Wow. And then before the draft, Bill came out to Rock Island and worked me out in the gym.
Well, back in the day, as I recall, as being a kid, of course, because I'm so much younger than you guys, the draft was no big deal. Obviously, there wasn't an ESPN. It wasn't a big deal. I would read about my team's picks in the paper. I had no idea who these guys were. So once you're drafted, how do you hear about it? And you said you went to Cincinnati right away, huh?
Well, yeah, it was funny because we're sitting around our apartment in Rock Island. And, of course, all my buddies and teammates were there. And I went out and bought a quarter barrel of beer at our local college bar. I couldn't afford it, but he let me get it on credit, thinking that I might get a chance to play football. And we went back there, and you're sitting around all day. And it was about 4:30, and I got a call from the Bengals secretary, and, that Bill Walsh wanted to talk to me and told me that they had drafted me, and put the secretary on the phone. And, she made all the flight arrangements for me to come in the next day. And then I got down there and, went out to dinner with Mike Brown and Bill Walsh. And we went back after that to negotiate my contract at the stadium about 10 o'clock at night. And I remember Mike offered me a 3-year contract for $18,000, $20,000 and $22,000 and a $7,500 signing bonus. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm okay with the $18,000 a year. I had a teaching job lined up at New Trier High School, and my uncle said, that's only going to be for $5,000. But for some reason, I said I wanted a $10,000 signing bonus. And Mike pulled a check out of his pocket, already made out to me for $7,500. Said, "This is what you're going to get." And I said, "Fine. Where do I sign?" So, like I said, I went back, and like I said, I wasn't in school at that time, so I went and got an apartment in Cincinnati and spent the off season, which was probably the best thing I ever did, because meeting with Bill for 3 days a week and getting a chance for him to install the offense with just me there and going out and give me the basics of what he wanted me to be as a quarterback, I think really shaped my future.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. You had Paul Brown as your head coach, is that right?
Yeah, that is correct, for my first 5 years. And
yeah. So what was that like, working with Paul Brown and Bill Walsh?
Well, Paul was already a legend. Going into his office when I first went down to sign, and there's a big rug in front of his desk that was a tiger skin rug with the head still on it. That was pretty impressive. And of course, you knew all about him, but Bill Walsh wasn't the genius back at that time. He was just kind of, he came to the Bengals in 1968, and was kind of developing the West Coast offense. And all of a sudden, I got a chance to play, I think 4 games my rookie year when the starter was hurt, and then became the starter in the second year. And that's, I think, when the West Coast offense really started to take shape.
Did you sense with your contact with Bill Walsh, both as a college player and then when you got drafted, that he was going to become something special? Did you sense that?
Well, I didn't know. It was such a different deal going from a Division III school to the NFL. It's not like I was playing at Illinois or Notre Dame or Northwestern, something like that in the Big Ten. But, so I was kind of just a clean slate that he, could kind of mold me to what he wanted me to be. And when we started off learning to drop, I was just literally standing in place, moving my feet and getting my arm to go at the same time. And then it was walking back and then jogging. And so, we took a month learning the fundamentals, but that carried me through, my whole career.
Was Cincinnati the first team to use the West Coast offense in the NFL?
Well, it was kind of designed out of necessity a little bit. They were an expansion team, and everybody thinks it's kind of a dink and dunk offense, but it was using the field, not only vertically but horizontally, making it cover the whole field. And Bill, the West Coast offense was kind of a system as well of how you called formations, how you called protections, how you called plays. I know Bill was really one of the first guys that, as basic as it seems, was timing the quarterback's drop with the depth of the wide receivers and having a progression to go through. So, there's, on the first step, I knew if my first guy was going to be there, by my first hitch, I'm already number 2, and the second one to number 3, and then it's time to find a flare control. So it was a precision offense, and, it worked pretty well for us.
Right.
Ken, in 1975, you guys had 11-3 mark, and you made the playoffs. And that year, you did receive the NFL Man of the Year award, which is now the Walter Payton Award. And it's been said, and I've read this, that you have indicated this is perhaps your most special award. Why don't you talk to our audience a little bit about why that's so?
Well, I think, that award was not only for what you've accomplished, on the field, but what you've done off the field. And I was involved in a lot of things, in my career. And at that time, I was, heavily involved with Easter Seals. And they used to have the Easter Seals telethon. I was on their board for a while and did a lot of those things. And so I think, and I'm really proud. I was the first one of the Bengals to win it, and several have won it since then. But I think it's just a tradition of Cincinnati that all the guys in the football team, even to this day, and what Joe Burrow does and what Sam Hubbard has done, doing the best to make the community that you live in, a special place, a better place. And I was happy to have a little bit of a part of that.
And as I said before, you take that concept and you actually bring it back to Batavia as well, year after year, and you're to be so commended for that. Now, after a few down years, late 70s, you guys charged into the playoffs in '82 and faced the San Diego, at that time, San Diego Chargers in the AFC championship game in '82. Now, for our audience who are just late bloomers to the NFL, played in one of the coldest NFL games in history. -9, but -59 wind chill. I probably have a few follow-up questions, but in general, what was it like to play in a game like that?
Yeah, well, you can't believe it. And I always say it is the coldest game in NFL history by the wind chill. And so I think that was the problem. I've talked to Dan Fouts a lot about it. The problem wasn't the temperature so much as it was the wind really affecting, your throwing. But I remember in that game, they brought in heated benches, which we had never seen before. And it's in the first quarter, and I'm on the sidelines, and luckily I've got my helmet on because I sit down the bench and I'm sitting on my hands to keep them warm, and they have little slots for your feet to go in. And then somebody threw a cape over me, and after a minute or so, there's a big roar of the crowd, and I stand up to see if there's a turnover if I'm going back in, and I stand up, and my feet don't come out of the slots, and I go down, and the first is my face mask. Oh. And I'm seeing stars and hearing birds, and I'm calling for the trainer. I said, his name was Marv Pollen. I said, Marv, give me some smelling salts. Do something. I said, I can't get knocked out of the AFC Championship game falling off the bench. And so I go back in and play. And, of course, in those days, there were no cell phones, and they didn't have as many cameras covering the game. So it was not caught on film anywhere. But thinking about today's football, I'd still be on NFL Follies for that. And I might have had to gone to the concussion protocol and not finish the game. So, I'm kind of glad of that. So it turned out pretty good.
Did any players get frostbite in that game?
Oh, yes. Oh, several. And Dan and I still talk about it that, it gets to be, about 50 degrees out of this little wind. The tips of our fingers start turning white. We better put some gloves on. So I get cold pretty easy nowadays.
I read this tidbit about this game, and I thought I'd throw this out to you. Maybe you guys talked about it before. The Chargers the week before played in Miami, and they won in overtime against the Dolphins. The temperature in Miami was 87 degrees. Was there any effect upon them coming all of a sudden from 87, with the wind chill, almost 100-degree change in temperature?
Well, yeah, I mean, their owner went to Paul Brown. They tried to get the game postponed or maybe move it out to San Diego. And what people don't remember is we had played the Chargers in San Diego earlier in the year and beat them convincingly. And had they beat us in their home park, the championship game would have been in San Diego. So, we earned the right to play it under those conditions. But I think
all right, we're going to take go ahead.
I was going to say, what I think the one thing though is that, of course, we go to the Super Bowl, and we had a week off. Before we went up to Pontiac, we were still practicing that week, but we stayed in Cincinnati and tried to practice outdoors, and the conditions were the same. But now you don't have the heaters on the practice field or the heated benches, so you couldn't get a lot done. And I always wondered what would have happened if we'd gone somewhere with better conditions or had an indoor facility to practice in, where we might have got more work done before we went to Pontiac.
We're going to take a small break. When we return, we're going to expand upon that. We're going to move to the 82 Super Bowl in Pontiac and review some of your career accomplishments and talk about coaching, broadcasting, getting a law degree, and retirement. All of that with Ken Anderson after we return from one of our fine sponsors. You stay tuned. Ciao, amici. Andiamo in Italia. Join Ray and Pat, just a couple of guys, and Intertrab in Tuscany and Rome. Intertrab, a leader in custom group travel, has created an Italian travel experience that shares the best of what Tuscany and Rome have to offer. Located in St. Charles since the 1980s, Intertrab was founded in 1966 in Chicago by Dave House on the principle of offering first-class customized travel programs at a fair value price. Our 10-day escorted tour visits Tuscany and Rome's most amazing places. Spend our first 2 nights in the heart of the Tuscan hills overlooking the ancient town of San Gimignano. We will spend the next 4 nights in the elegant spa town of Montecatini Terme, perfectly located between Florence and Pisa. While we are in Tuscany, enjoy vineyard visits and wine tasting and an Italian cooking class in the heart of Tuscany. We will visit ancient San Gimignano, amazing Siena, timeless Florence, see the Field of Miracles in Pisa, and spend a day on the Cinque Terre, 5 picturesque, colorful fishing villages that cling to the cliffs overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. Our tour ends in Rome, where we will see the highlights of the Eternal City, including the Colosseum, Trevi Fountain, and the Pantheon. We will end with a visit to the Vatican, where we will see Michelangelo's incredible Sistine Chapel and awe-inspiring St. Peter's Basilica. First-class hotels, buffet breakfast daily, 5 dinners, full sightseeing schedule with transportation by private deluxe motor coach, an amazing Italian tour manager to show the amazing country in nonstop flights on American Airlines. Join Pat and Ray, just a couple of guys, for this once-in-a-lifetime experience. Andiamo. Live theater. There's nothing quite like it. The lush and glittering costumes, the meticulously crafted set pieces to make you feel like you're in a back alley in New York, an actor's choice of a smirk or hair toss that brings their characters to life. Add to the mix iconic songs and stories, all told from the beautiful stage at her historic theater, and you have Broadway at the Paramount. See and feel the magic unfolding around you as Paramount presents their 15th season of unforgettable musicals and memories. Starting in August, Mean Girls. With big laughs, bold style, unforgettable pop rock songs, and a message that hits home, this show is a must-see for anyone who's ever tried to find their place in the crowd. For the holiday season, A Christmas Carol. Rediscover the magic of the holiday season with this timeless tale that warms hearts reminds us all of the true spirit of Christmas, adapted specifically for the Paramount stage. Start spring off right with Sunday in the Park with George. Art, love, and life beautifully collide in Stephen Sondheim's masterpiece inspired by Georges Seurat's famous painting A Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. And finally, Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Bursting with color, energy, and some of Broadway's most memorable songs, it's a joyful celebration of hope and perseverance. Subscriptions are on sale now for Paramount's 2026-27 Broadway series. See all 4 shows for 50% off the full ticket price. Single tickets go on sale in June. Learn more at ParamountAurora.com.
Former NFL quarterback Ken Anderson, famous from the Cincinnati Bengals in the 70s. Ken, I'm a Raider fan. I used to live in Oakland, California. So you remember the Raiders of the 70s, right?
Oh yeah. In fact, my 2 moments against the Raiders is that was one of those games. I was playing as a rookie. We went out there, and I think it was the third game I played. And our starter's out with a broken collarbone. So if I don't, we only carry 2 quarterbacks. So if I get hurt, the punter goes in. So in the first quarter, I drop back to pass and I let it go, and I get hit in the hip by Ben Davidson. And I'm laying on the ground, and I've never been in so much pain in my life. And we had a veteran tackle named Ernie Wright who picked me up by the back of the pants and said, "Rookie, get your ass back in the huddle. You're all we got."
Yeah.
And so, I finished out that game, but then in the 1975, we won the division. No, in 1975 we were 11-3, but we were the wild card. The Steelers were 12-2, and so we went out and we played Oakland in the first round of the playoffs and got beat. I think it was 31-28, and we're going down to try to win the game. At the end, it's 4th down, and I can still see Chip Myers breaking wide open, but before I could get it off, I got sacked by Hendrickson. They were outside.
Oh, yeah.
Ted Hendricks, this mad stork.
Kick him in the head, Ted.
Yeah, and the game was over. So, yeah, I got a little history with the Raiders.
Yes. Well, let's take you to that Super Bowl. You reunite with Bill Walsh. And did you guys talk before the game or get together before the game in any way?
Well, I would see him every day because the only place to practice was in the Pontiac Superdome. And so we were practicing in the afternoon. They practiced in the morning. So as we were coming in, they were going out. So he and I always got to say hi, in the hallways there. And I remember, after the game, I had carried my son off the field. And so we were going from the locker room to the buses, and Bill was doing out in the hallway his post-game press conference. And I kind of walked up and waved to him, and he stopped the press conference and came back and shared a few words with my son and I. So I always appreciate him for that.
Yeah. Do you feel as though you got cheated because you guys played in a cold weather city as opposed to Miami? Or
well, I think only with the things that surround it. I mean, but you're kind of sequestered. You don't do much anyway, and so you kind of didn't notice it. I mean, we found a little pizza joint that had some picnic tables on the inside that we could go and have a couple of beers at night after our meetings. But there's nothing glamorous about it. And I remember the buses on both teams were late getting to the stadium because they'd closed off. It's all basically one way in, and they had blocked it off for the vice president. I think it was Gerald Ford at the time, for him to get to the game. But no, I mean, it was just we went out and we kicked off to them. They fumbled the opening kickoff, and we had the ball in great field position. And they say the team that scores first has the percentages say that they win the game. Right. And so we go down and we're on the 5-yard line, 3rd and goal on the 5, and in chip shot field goal range from Jimmy Breach, who never missed. And so we're going 3 wide receivers to the left, and we're picking outside in for Isaac Curtis to come underneath. Got the exact coverage that we wanted, and I throw in the end zone, and Dwight Hicks picks it off and runs it out to about the 20, and they take it down and score first. I saw Dwight years later at a celebrity golf tournament and said, "Hey, how you doing?" He said, "I'm surprised you're talking to me." And I said, "Well, I've forgotten about that. I only think about it every day." But he said, "I just want to tell you something. I blew the coverage. I wasn't supposed to be there." So I said, "Well, you rotten son of a bitch."
Yeah.
And then, we went down and we fumbled 2 kickoff. Well, the next beginning of the second quarter, I hit Collinsworth for a first down inside the 10, and he fumbles, and we lose that one. We had a couple kickoffs that we muffed right before halftime. That gave them an extra 6 points. And so it was just our own mistakes that was costing us, because I think that was the first Super Bowl where the losing team had more touchdowns, more total yards, more first downs than the team that won. It was just, our self-inflicted mistakes that cost us the game.
And do you attribute that to that lack of quality practice time that you talked about earlier?
Oh, I'd like to make that excuse, but
Right.
who knows what would have happened? But
Right.
It was a disappointing loss for sure.
Well, it seems like you had a good game regardless. And talk a little bit about those receivers. We all know Chris Collinsworth. We certainly can recall his voice. But you had Isaac Curtis, and who was your tight end?
Danny Ross, who set a Super Bowl record at that time, I think, with 11 receptions. Chris Collinsworth, that was his rookie year, and he got over 1,000 yards receiving and went to the Pro Bowl. And, although Isaac was, at the end of his career, at that point in time, he could still play. And I remember the game we played in San Diego. They were going to take away Chris Collinsworth, and Isaac catches passes for about 150 yards. So we had a great third wide receiver in Steve Kreider. So we had a good passing attack. We had Pete Johnson as our fullback, and Charlie Alexander from LSU, and Archie Griffin, as our tailback. So we had a real good offense.
You guys were very good in the 70s, early 80s, as I recall. Did you ever get close to getting back into the game, the Super Bowl?
Well, yeah, it went down to we got beat 26-21, and we were driving down at the end. That was the final score, but we drove down, and at about the 2-minute warning, we scored. So I threw a touchdown pass to Danny Ross to make it a 6-point game, and we couldn't recover the onside kick. So it got to be close at the end.
But what I meant was, in subsequent years, did you guys get close?
Well, no, the next year was a strike-shortened year, but we were still tied for the best record in the NFL at 7-2. And you think you're going back, to the Super Bowl, but we got the New York Jets. We played them, in Cincinnati, and we got beat. And that was kind of the last time we sniffed it till it was Boomer Esiason's turn in 1988.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your career. You were the MVP in 1981, which is the Super Bowl year, as I recall. And then you had the passing title 4 times, 74, 75, 81, and 82. The passing title is what? Most yardage?
Well, no, it's a combination of yards, completion percentage, touchdowns. I couldn't tell you the formula that they used for it, but I won it 4 times.
Nice. And then I guess you held the completion record until Drew Brees surpassed you of 70.6% completion. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, and he got it, but he didn't play the last game of that year. They had already clinched the playoffs. So I said, if you would have played that last game, I would have still had it. But it would have been. It's still, gosh, I think Joe Burrow was I don't know what 77% last year, something like that. So, but it lasted for a long time, which I was pretty proud of.
Yeah, I would be proud of that. Ray?
Yeah.
Ken, you retired, and immediately before you got involved in any kind of coaching, you went to the radio booth for Cincinnati for looks like 7 years, 87, 93. Reflect upon that a little bit. How was broadcasting football? How did that fit your itinerary, so to speak?
Well, it was fun for me. I mean, I do a little I worked with the morning DJ and I did the sports reports. And then he was a great guy. It was the best job I ever had, except for the first report came at 5:30 in the morning. So it was a 3 o'clock wake up call to get to work. But, doing the games was fun because we had a great play-by-play guy. But my roommate, Dave Lapham, was already doing the games on radio. So for he and I to work together was a lot of fun. Then I started doing some TV work at the same time. And I remember one day Nick Clooney was the news anchor for one of the stations in town. And it had to be George Clooney's father. But he asked me to come in one Monday and do some highlights. And so I did that. And from that on, I kind of was doing some things there. And then the owner of the company, after 6 years, had asked me to become the sports anchor. And I really didn't want to do it. But when the boss asks you to do it, you got to kind of say you're going to do it. And so I know I was just getting ready to start that fall. And I got a call from HBO. They had the show Inside the NFL with Nick Bonacani and Lenny Dawson.
Oh, I remember that.
They wanted to add a third guy. And I went to our news director and he wouldn't let me do it. So I was a little upset and I didn't like, I was not a sports anchor type. And so I kind of made up my mind then that I was, I always wanted to go into coaching. I mean, I thought I was going to be a high school math teacher and football and basketball coach. I'd always wanted to coach. And so I would use that time, doing the radio broadcast to talk to different coaches and say, if anything comes up during the off season, let me know. And so I left that, after that 1 year of doing the sports at the first of the year. And I was doing a radio show on Monday night after the season. And, Dave Lapham and I had a call-in show. We do it at different local restaurants around town. And of course, the head coach could never do it until after the last game. And so Dave Shula was the head coach and he came and did the show. And he said, Kenny, are you serious about me going into coaching? I said, yes. Well, come on and interview. I'm going to have a quarterback coach opening. Come in and interview tomorrow. And he gave me the job. So that's how I got into coaching.
And you coached for 3 separate NFL teams between 1993 and 2010. The Bengals, of course, Jacksonville, and then my guess, one of your arch rivals, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I was let go with the Bengals after 10 years when Marvin Lewis got the job. And I understood that, the head coach gets the right to bring his own people and that was not an issue. And then so I got a job with Jack Del Rio on his first staff in Jacksonville. And was a great situation. We had a home in Hilton Head and we were, 3 hours away. So that was nice for the off season. I thought we'll just ride out the string in Jacksonville and, I'll retire as a coach there. And then after 4 years, Jack Del Rio, I think in 6 years as a head coach, he fired 19 assistant coaches. And I lasted 4. So I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah.
And then so I'm looking for a job and, all of a sudden I get a call from Mike Tomlin. I knew Bruce Arians, who was going to be the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. And I knew him and he had talked to Mike and Mike Tomlin called me and said, I think I got a good chance to get the Steelers job. Would you come and coach the quarterbacks? And I said, yeah. And he got the job and I went to work up there for 3 years. And, people gave me a lot of grief for that. And I said, well, I wasn't the one that asked to leave Cincinnati. I was told to leave. So, I mean, I had to get a job and, go into Pittsburgh. And it was the Rooney family treated me great. Coach Tom was a great guy to work for. And our second year there, we won a Super Bowl. So nice. I remember after the game, getting back to the hotel and I'm waiting for my family to come on the buses there. So I'm in the bar waiting on them. And, Lynn Swan, all the guys come up and said, hey, Kenny, congratulations. He said, you finally won a Super. You're going to get a ring. Had to come to Pittsburgh to get it, though, didn't you? So,
Ken, we're going to try it here at the end. Pat and I are just going to throw some quick hitters at you.
Okay.
The quick topics and have you just comment any way you want to. Let me start by saying, team-wise and individual player-wise, who are your fiercest opponents?
Well, I mean, I think it's got to be the Steelers. I mean, of the 70s and 80s, they were, one of the dynasties in the NFL. And, You look at a number of the Hall of Famers that they had on it, and the defenses they had were legendary. So, it's got to be the Steelers defense. As far as the player, probably Joe Green, was a great, another great Hall of Famer. But so I'll give you one story about that. And I knew those guys from Pro Bowls and that kind of stuff. And so 1979 was the worst Bengals team I was ever on. We were awful. We were 0-7, and the Steelers were 7-0 on the way to another Super Bowl. They come into Cincinnati. I think we beat them 34-10, and they didn't cross midfield till the fourth quarter. Chuck Noll told them after the game, if I didn't know you guys better, I thought you threw the game. Well, about a month later, we're playing in Pittsburgh, and we're getting killed, and I'm getting killed. And it's in the fourth quarter, and Joe Green sacks me again. And he's laying on top of me. He says, Kenny, why don't you come in the locker room for a beer after the game? And so at the old Three Rivers Stadium, the locker rooms were right next to each other. So I walked out of ours into theirs, and the first guy I see is Terry Bradshaw, and he's doing his media interviews, and he stops, takes me to the back of the locker room, and they turned off their sun. I had a garbage can full of beer in there. And so we sit down, have a couple of beers, and I'm feeling better about life, and I go out to catch the buses to go to the airport, and they've left. And I go, oh, wait, how do I explain I got fined and had to buy a plane ticket from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati because I'm in the Steelers locker room drinking beer? So I'm running around looking for a cab to go to the airport, and there goes our equipment truck. And so I flag it down. I ride out there, and for some reason, our plane is late getting there, and we could just pull right up to the gate, and the guy lets me in the side door, and the team's standing around. At first, I'm upset. I said, the starting quarterback's not there, and they don't know. And I started to think maybe they know, they just didn't care.
It was a plan. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Hall of Fame. Ray talked about it. You've got incredible statistics. You obviously were winning those passing titles and the MVP, and you went to the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts about the Super Bowl? It's my understanding you made the senior spot last couple of times, I think, and you're eligible for it again. Where do you stand on that?
I don't know. I don't know what the voters think. I think the quarterback position is the one position that they weight heavily if you want a Super Bowl or not. I don't think any other position is judged by that except by quarterbacks.
Right.
So, and of course, we didn't do it. So I guess I've gotten close a few times, and some of the senior voters said, well, he'll get in eventually. And I did a podcast for a couple of them one time, and I said, if you're going to do it fairly soon, will you? Because, I want to be able to enjoy being a Hall of Famer.
Right.
I know we had, our second one from the Bengals go in, and Kenny Riley, but unfortunately, he had already passed away, and his son had to go up and make the acceptance speech for him. And I would not want that to happen.
Right.
So I have no idea. And, I'm in Batavia's Wall of Fame. I'm in Augustana's Tribe of Viking Hall of Fame. I'm in the Bengals Ring of Honor. I just went into the Illinois Sports Hall of Fame and the Ohio Sports Hall of Fame. I'm in the National Quarterback Club Hall of Fame. So, that ain't bad for a kid.
Oh, you're doing great. And if this standard does apply, then why isn't Jim Plunkett in the Hall of Fame? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
who knows?
Yeah.
Ken, what were some of your favorite cities to play in, and some of the cities you would rather have avoided?
Gosh. I don't know. One city was kind of the same as the other. All we did is we would go, get in a bus at the airport and go to a hotel. And then from the hotel, we'd go to the stadium the next day. And from the stadium, we go back to the airport. So, we never, with the Bengals, we never had meal money. We never went out to dinner, on the road. So we're always kind of self-contained. And in fact, with Paul Brown, he would put us in a bus and we would go to a movie, the night before a game, and see really lousy movies, by the way. So as we went along, sometimes we would sit in the back. There weren't a lot of people, put this management that went to the movies. And so we sit in the back and sneak out and try to find a place to get a beer and get back in time to catch the bus to go back to the hotel. But So, but when you talk about, I always loved going to Cleveland because of the stadium. It was old. It was the worst locker room in the league. You had a tunnel we went down into the third base dugout, and it was concrete, and you had to wear long cleats when you're playing there. And of course, for the visiting team, they wouldn't put any carpeting, on the concrete runway, and so you're kind of holding the walls with both hands and kind of sliding down so you wouldn't fall. But when you got out there, and like I say, it was an old stadium, but it just dripped with tradition.
Right.
Otto Graham played there. Marion Motley played there. Jim Brown played there. I mean, it was just the tradition in that stadium was really, something to play, And of course, I always had good games there. Maybe that's why I liked it too.
Speaking of NFL tradition, and I know Pat alluded to his allegiance to the Raiders before, can't leave this podcast without you reflecting on one individual who we both have a great respect for. Well, as a coach and an announcer, we thought we'd have you talk about both. John Madden.
I got my first Pro Bowl. He was the head coach, and it was down in New Orleans, and which I was really excited about. And what was funny is that we would be in the meeting room and watching practice film, and he was the coach that ran the projector. And I said, Paul Brown never did this. As head coaches really do this. So that was really a pleasure to play for him, and know him a little bit in the Pro Bowl. And after that, he was doing TV, and it's unlike today that the TV crews didn't, come in, on Friday and interview or have, sit down interviews with players for the home team. And then on Saturdays, they do the visiting. They never did that. So, I never saw any of the broadcasters that did a game. The only time I saw one was John Brody. And we were playing in Cincinnati. We were playing Pittsburgh near the end of the year. And my roommate at that time was John Shinners, an offensive lineman. And he was going to retire after that season. And he said, Kenny, I'm going to retire. It's our last home game. You got to come out to dinner with me beforehand. So I did. And so we go and met him down there. I got there a little bit early. And so I'm sitting at the bar having a couple beers, and then John Brody comes in, and then Shinners come in. So we all have dinner together and having a few more beers, and got back to the hotel. And he said, well, that's our last one. Come, I brought some beer up to the room, and a few too many that night, and wake up in the morning, and it's like, below zero. And I'm going, oh, what the hell did I do? Well, I went out and threw for over 300 yards, and we had to beat the Steelers by 7 and win the next week to go to the playoffs, and we beat them by 7. Well, we go, the next week we're playing down in Houston, and we win that game. We're in the playoffs. We get beat and don't go into the playoffs, and I did not have a beer before the game. So now there's a moral to the story somewhere, and I'm not sure what it is, but maybe I should have had a couple of beers before the game.
There's one more thing. A couple more things we want to get in before we let you go. There's 2 Juris Doctorates on this podcast. One is Pat Crimmins, my partner, and the other is you, sir. And I asked the question, what prompted you to go out and get a Juris Doctorate?
Well, you had to find. We didn't make a lot of money playing football in those days, and we all had jobs in the off season. We didn't have an off-season program because everybody worked. And so our off-season program was 9 weeks of training camp. But, I was a cerebral kind of guy. I was a math major, and going to law school really helped me for the fact that it just got my brain working again, studying, thinking about things. And it took me 5 off seasons, but I got my degree. And I was going to become a player agent, which I was already lined up with a law firm in Cincinnati, and so I remember it was after the Super Bowl year when I got my degree in January, and so that off season, I had a lot of opportunities to go places and speak, do that kind of stuff, and so I never took a bar review course. And the bar exam was the first 3 days of training camp. And I thought, God, I'm not ready to take this test. And, but Forrest Gregg was going to give me the first 3 days of training camp off to take the bar exam. I said, I'd rather take that exam than go to training camp. So I did that, and I missed the bar exam by 2.5 points. And I never retook it. I got into some other things at that point in time. So I have my degree, but I never passed the bar.
Well, what are you doing with yourself nowadays?
Well, I'm
taking care of that dog.
Yeah. Well, hold on 1 second. I'll let him out. Somebody just came to the door.
We have a special guest here at the podcast.
I apologize for that.
Oh, that's all right.
But no, after I retired from coaching, we moved to Hilton Head and lived there for 13 years. But, we've got, 6 grandchildren up here. My wife has an aging mother that we wanted to be able to enjoy. And then I've got a foundation for adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So kind of the combination of the three just made sense to move back up here. And, people say, oh, Kenny, I can't wait to retire, go to Hilton Head and play golf. And I said, I did that for 13 years. I'm just ready for another chapter of my life right now. Plus we're closer to Batavia now.
Yeah. I wanted one more question, Ray, if I might. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the NFLPA and how it's treating you guys that played in the 60s and 70s. Do you think it is doing right by you guys finally, or do you have complaints?
Well, no, I have no complaints. I mean, they've bumped up our pension a little bit. You would always like it to be, a little bit better. I tell, people, I played 16 years. And if you add all total what I made, it wasn't $1 million. And wow. now I think Joe Burrow is going to be making $3 million a game this year. So it's, I say that and it's not envy or something like that, because I really, think the players deserve what they're getting nowadays, because that's what the revenues generate, and the players deserve their fair share of it. Right. So, I've got no complaints about that.
Ken, I can't thank you enough for, first of all, providing all the thrills and spills that both Pat and I enjoyed watching you play over the years, and we both did watch it, and we both enjoyed you immensely, even though Paul said but we're not Bengal fans, but I do like Joe Burrows, and I was rooting for the Bengals against the Rams a couple of years ago for sure. Anyway, more importantly, I think for our friends in the Fox Valley here, you're a testament to giving back in a lot of different places in the Fox Valley and Batavia, one of those areas. And we can't thank you enough for spending some time today to reflect upon not only your career, but your growing up here in the Fox Valley. And for that, we're very grateful. Thank you so much.
Well, I really appreciate it. And the only thing, next time I'm in town, you guys got to buy me a beer at the Bulldog Bar.
That'll be a pleasure. That'll be a pleasure. And actually, we won't pay for it. Paul Stukel will come out, and he will pay the tab at that point in time.
Hey.
Thank you, Paul. Now I'm really getting thirsty.
All right. Don't believe a word these guys say, brother. Don't do it.
Okay.
He still owes me a bottle of scotch.
I do.
Ken Anderson, fine, and for both Pat and I, a Hall of Fame quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, the pleasure.
We're going to take a small break. Be back for some closing comments. You stay tuned.
Okay. Thank you very much.
𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿 Booth, a leading local law firm, is located on the beautiful Fox River in downtown St. Charles. Here's Ryan 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿.
For better or worse, there are just times people need a lawyer. Whether you are involved in a work injury, in an automobile crash, selling a home, or even planning for your estate after your passing, we're here. We're local. We're part of the community.
For more information, visit 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿 Booth on the web at tbfirm.com or give them a call at 630-526-4242. Well, we're back and we're smirking and laughing and having a good time here. And probably because we really did enjoy our interview with Ken Anderson. Pat, Batavia guy who still enjoys his roots, still enjoys talking about the NFL. And it looks to be like a very nice, comfortable retirement.
I have encouraged all my children to go to Batavia on a weekly basis and just drink the water because obviously something is going on in the great city of Batavia when you have one of the greatest mayors in the history of the Fox Valley and you have these pro athletes and not only pro athletes, but a variety of other successful athletes that come out of Batavia and are Bulldog proud, right?
Yes, and we talked to Jim Roberts about this, and that's why I think they gather every year for a golf outing, and they also have a basketball get together in March, which we've attended before. And you're right; it's just a matter of the fact that they're all pride. They have a lot of pride about what they have accomplished, what they can still accomplish for the city of Batavia, for the sports programs, for the the entire view of the city and how it's presented. They appreciate what the city did for them, and they're certainly giving back in a variety of ways. And I admire that tremendously. I think that
Sure.
city pride is very, very important. You and I, you at the high school, St. Charles. I know you like St. Charles a lot. I'm from Joliet, but St. Charles has been home for 5 decades, and I have great pride in the city. But I'm always happy to see people having pride in their communities.
More of
Here
a
in the
mock,
here in the
more,
Fox Valley, it's all over the place.
more of a mock trial success in St. Charles than pro athletes, but we do have Randy Wright, and of course our friend Mark. What's the last name?
Vitale.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and don't ever forget another podcast guest who played the Olympics or ran in the Olympics.
Rick
Wohlhutter.
Yeah.
Exactly
Sure.
right. So Ken Anderson, quarterback, he took a lot of hits during the year, and he talked about the fact that he's got a couple of fusions and a couple of knees, but he's still out there playing golf and enjoying his grandkids. And I was impressed by the fact that he got that Juris Doctorate.
I was a kid back in the day, but I was a huge football fan. And I enjoyed watching the Bengals. I never hated the Bengals like I did the Steelers or the Dolphins. They were always good.
Or the Chiefs or the Broncos.
Well, the Chiefs were insignificant, and the Broncos always are. But no, I enjoyed those guys. They were classy. I kind of felt sorry for them because of the Paul Brown thing, but they were good athletes and they were good human beings. And this Chris Collinsworth guy has gone on to some level of fame, so they've done well. And Ken Anderson was always a great guy.
We didn't talk about this guy, but I know he threw a lot of passes to him as well. He succeeded later on in the TDs. And I taught with his uncle at St. Charles High School, and that would be Bob Trumpy.
Oh yeah,
Can't forget Bob Trumpy. He was quite an end receiver for the Bengals.
tight end.
Later on, went on with Dick Enberg to do AFC football.
He was great.
Yes, Bob Trumpy.
Now, I mean, we could have a whole show about the classic announcers because absolutely fantastic, much better.
That would be an interesting show just to reflect upon what each of us think about certain announcers. Anyway, it's time for us to say goodbye, and so we will. And as always, thanks to Ken Anderson. Profuse thank you to Ken Anderson for time well spent, and for our crack producer behind the screen, but always in our hearts. Still owes me something. Paul Stukel. Paul, thank you so much for your time and efforts today. And by the way, thank you for some of the podcasts. I wanted to hit the streets yesterday when Ron Onesti, when I watched it, really admired your work of putting in pictures as we were talking. And I thought that was a nice touch that you did.
Thank
I
you,
thought
Ray.
the podcast was, I thought the podcast was nominated for the editing. It's not the on-screen talent, but the editing.
I would agree with that, but I just the fact that he put all this stuff together shows he is working there in his studio.
Studio, we'll call it, right?
Paul has no comment to make about
No
that.
comment. No comment at all.
For my partner Pat Crimmins, Ray Rogan, wishing you all a day weekend. The heat's coming back, Pat, so stay cool.
Well, you do what you can, and that'll affect my exercise program, of course. But we'll do the air conditioning or something.
Sir. Forge ahead. Ray and Pat.
Pat and Ray.
Just a couple of guys appreciating your viewing, appreciating you supporting our sponsors. Until next time, we say so long, everybody.
And he wants to throw. We have an aerial show today for Collinsworth. He's got it.
One of the most accurate arms and an uncanny mind to pick up blitzes. He was impossible for us to blitz. He'll go down as one of the greatest quarterbacks that ever played.